This is E&P Reports, a service of Editor and Publisher magazine. Since 1884, the authoritative voice of news publishing. And hi, once again, Mike Blinder, publisher of Editor and Publisher. Quick commercial announcement. If you're enjoying these podcasts and videos that we issue each week as part of E&P Reports, feel free to subscribe right now if you're on YouTube to the little button below. And if you're listening to us in the various podcast channels that we distribute to, please feel free to subscribe. That way you'll get an update each and every time we publish a new segment of E&P Reports. Today we're going to discuss disparities. And we're going to do it through a great organization. You likely know the name Nancy Lane and Local Media Association. Nance and I go way back many, many years. But they have been doing so much with so many different initiatives over the past few years. And this is a brand new one called, it's called Amplify Ohio because it ties in three separate Ohio news publishers. Those three publishers are Black Girl Media, Columbus Black, and the Buckeye Flame. But what they have in common is obviously Columbus Black and Black Girl Media are targeted markets to communities of color in Ohio. But the Flame is a publication statewide for the LGBTQ plus communities of Ohio. And they have something similar in their need to get their voices out, and that is health disparities that impact these communities, especially being amplified through COVID-19. But as we get into our dialogue over the next 35 minutes, it goes deeper than that. There are many disparities and many issues that these three separate publications are trying to address with their audiences. And thanks to LMA, this project's being incubated through them and the funding they're helping provide and the guidance as well through Joe Matissa, who will be the principal who will serve as the project manager. Anyway, let's get to work. This is going to be a very lively dialogue, and I hope you'll stay with us through it. As I chat with, on E&P Reports, Shana Black, founder and publisher of Black Girl Media, Kevin Lloyd, founder and chief executive officer of Columbus Black, and Ken Schneck, editor of the Buckeye Flame. And of course, Nancy Lane, CEO of LMA. Well, good morning, group. It's an honor to have you on E&P Reports today. Our old friend, Nancy Lane. Nancy up there, why don't you give us the overview before we introduce our panel here on what Amplify Ohio is and how LMA got started with all this stuff. Is that okay?
Yeah, I would love to. Thanks for having us, Mike.
My pleasure.
Amplify Ohio is the fifth collaborative that we've launched in the last 10 months. So suffice to say, we're bullish on industry collaboration. But the reason we decided to work with this group is because of the three individuals involved. We believe in the mission of all three publishers, and this group wants to work together. And if there's one thing we've learned in launching 5 collaboratives over the last 10 months, it's that you want to work with people who truly want to be collaborative, who are going to show up at the meetings, who are going to do the heavy lifting, the hard work. Collaboration is hard. And let me tell you something, these three individuals want to, and we're going to have a lot of success.
How do you do it, Nancy? Before we move on, LMA has launched more initiatives in a COVID-19 world that you could shake a stick at. I mean, in a normal world, this would be impressive, but you've just been in overdrive this year, launching more ways to support the industry. Are you finding in the COVID Zoom world it's difficult, or is it just business as usual?
We released our impact report today, and 2020 was the best financial year in our history, times 4. And it's because of the crisis, right? We had a lot of funding come in to help the industry, to help them with relief grants, relief funds, to help them with journalism projects. And it was a direction we were already going. And when COVID hit, we were able to capitalize on that in a much bigger way. So we didn't sleep much in 2020, and 2021 hasn't started out, any differently. But I will say I'm proud of the work that we're doing, and you're going to see a lot more of it. And we've added to our team this year. We had to be able to take on all these projects. 2 new hires announced in the last week. So it's needed, Mike. We're trying to save an industry here. local journalism is at stake in news deserts and all of the things we read about. Like there's a lot at stake, so there's no time to sleep.
Well, Nancy, LMA is just working so hard, and I know you guys don't do it for the money, you do it for the industry. So if anyone wants a hold of you, localmedia.org, am I correct? That's the website for the Local Media Association. Let's introduce our panel now. Shana Black, founder and publisher of Black Girl Media. Shana, what is Black Girl Media, if you don't mind my asking?
Oh, sure. So Black Girl Media just started off as a blog, Black Girl in the CLE, where we were just telling stories to get people out in the community. Too often, I'm sure we all have experienced it, we kind of get into this go to work, come home, go to work, and just in the cycle. And here in Cleveland, we were really seeing it. But then the thought of this being a destination city, we've got all these great places to go and we're not going. So we started off with that. But as COVID hit in 2020, there was no place to go. So we had to do a pandemic pivot, as so many other organizations did. And we really pushed forth some of our podcast and a lot of collaborative work. We helped and supported misinformation efforts with First Draft. And so Black Girl Media was out of all of that because we were no longer just the blog. We were a blog, podcast, media strategy, research, and just really trying to support and uplift the community.
Someone goes to your blog, is it hyper local? Is it mostly just centered on Cleveland, or is it something that everybody can benefit from? Where's your content center, if I may ask?
It's very hyper local, but if you're planning to come to Cleveland, it's a great tool and resource for people to learn about where to go, what to do, what events are happening. So we really look at two fronts for Black Girl Media, for Black Girl in the CLE. How do we engage people that are coming to Cleveland? Because what we found out is a lot of times when people travel, especially African Americans, they're staying with friends and family. And when you stay with friends and family, you're going to your corner bar, your favorite bowling alley. You're not really going downtown. So it's where to go, and then just stories that can support African American women. So in that pivot, we really started expanding some of our stories to look at what's information that's important to Midwestern African American women.
All right, Kevin, Columbus Black, you're the founder and chief executive officer. Give us the quick overview of what Columbus Black is for the city of Columbus.
Thank you, Mike. Columbus Black is a primary online resource targeting and servicing the Black community, connecting them to commerce and culture. So on the commerce side, it's really around Black-owned businesses, supporting them, and/or major corporations that are looking to connect with the Black consumer here in Columbus. Or as the culture side, that's in regards to entertainment activities and things that are going on in the city. So we have evolved into an omni-channel platform. So through our website, through our email blast, text blast, and social media platforms, as well as now virtual, doing podcasts like this, we have the ability to reach our audience and get information out. So that's what columbusblack.com is.
And it's very hyper-local as well for the city of Columbus?
That is correct. Focused on Columbus, but we are in the process of looking to expand throughout the state of Ohio.
Oh, excellent. That's great. Shana, back to you quickly. How are you funded, Shana? How do you survive? What contributions, advertising, what's going on?
So initially it was all self-funded, just kind of a passion project. But really what helped us this year was kind of getting in collaborative. So we've been on this journey of collaborative journalism for about a year now. And so we've worked with some really great partners, API, Trusted Elections Network. We are part of the Election SOS project here with Amplify Ohio. And along with Ken, I'm part of Northeast Ohio Solutions Journalism Collab. We call it Neo-Sojo. So that's been kind of what helped keep us afloat this year.
How about you, Kevin? Where's the cash coming from?
Yeah, so we end up doing, we work on a few different contracts. We promote different events and activities throughout the city, but also we work with the city of Columbus. So campaigns like Celebrate One, we've worked with identifying the chief of police for the city of Columbus. We work with Franklin County, especially now as you look at COVID and trying to get information out to our residents. So we do a number of projects like that, as well as just small businesses when they want to promote or advertise their business. That's how we generate our capital, primarily through advertising at this point.
All right, Ken, let's get you involved here. Ken, you are the editor of the Buckeye Flame. Am I correct, sir?
That is correct, yes.
What the heck is the Buckeye Flame for those of you that don't, those viewers and listeners who have no idea?
Absolutely. The Buckeye Flame stands as we are a statewide online publication. We are Ohio's only LGBTQ statewide publication. So we actually launched during the pandemic. We are a little bit less than 7 months old. And we are covering news and views of LGBTQ Ohioans here in the state that does not have full equality for the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community. There are so many stories to tell, and in particular, lifting up stories of LGBTQ people of color who have amazing victories in the state and also have some really distinct challenges.
You said publication, but is it online only, or are you actually printing something right now?
We right this second are online only, but check back with me later and we might be something else. But right now we are happily online only.
All right, so how did the three of you find each other? I mean, who wants to tell me the story before we, bring in Nancy and how she's supporting you? Raise your hand. Who wants to tell me how you guys all connected here? Shana, I'll leave it to you since you didn't raise your hand. How did you all get together and come up with this Amplify Ohio triad?
Honestly, it was through Nancy was our connector and Joe. But Ken and I had worked together. I always tell this story about how much I love being on this journey with Ken. He was the first person to give me a microphone. So my first podcast was with a microphone that Ken Schneck gave me. And we're actually using it today, Ken. So he's always been a supporter, and we've been, since we're both from Cleveland, kind of intersecting and working together. And so I think last summer I get this email that just seemed kind of like, "Hi, I'm Nancy, would you like to hop on a call with us?" And I'm like, "I guess, sure. I don't know what we're talking about. It's an opportunity." And, you get a lot of those like, "Hey, I'd love to connect with you about an opportunity" email. So I'm like, "Okay, I'm game. Let's go." And she says, we're exploring this opportunity, let me know what you think. We love your platform. And then it was just kind of like, okay, I'll just keep thinking, let's just see if we want to work together. And then eventually she circled back. Or then I think I got an email or a ping from Ken like, "Hey, have you happened to meet Nancy?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, yeah, I just talked to her today." And then from there, we met Kevin and Joe. And so the team kind of formed together, and we were just been kind of just like, we're going to work together, but we don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to work together. And so to finally be able to say, this is it, Amplify Ohio, is super amazing.
Well, Joe's not with us today. Nancy, we should bring you in then. Joe is the principal at Modern Lens Media. Is that correct? And he's going to be the project manager for Amplify Ohio. So Nancy, why don't you give us now the overview of what the heck Amplify Ohio is, what's its mission, and why did you reach out and get this thing all cooking and started in Ohio?
Well, it was Nancy Watsman, who used to run the Colorado Media Project, who told me I had to meet Shana Black. So that's why I reached out to Shana, and Shana was a fellow doing some work on misinformation and fact checking and those types of projects. And so I'm really glad that Nancy made that introduction. And then Joe was already working with Kevin and Ken, as I recall, on different projects. And so it all kind of came together. And this was a chance for us to experiment with a different kind of collaborative, a smaller collaborative, 3 publishers serving Black and LGBTQ communities who want to work together. And it's a very narrow focus. So 2 goals. On the journalism side, we want to tackle disparities in healthcare when it comes to Black and LGBTQ communities. It's a huge issue. And on the business side, we want to work on a community contribution portal using a common tech stack for all 3. So each would have their individual marketing plan and portal on their site, but we would be able to use a common technology stack and leverage that between the 3, which would be hard for them to do on their own. So I was able to get the LMA board to put up a small amount of funding, but I think it's a significant amount for this group. And our intention is to fundraise from here. And so anyone listening out there who would like to support this work, this is a plea from us that we would love your support, especially on that journalism side. There's a lot of stories to be told, and we need the funding in order to do it.
So, but your hope from this is to make this kind of a, I hate to use the term petri dish, but use this as a way to incubate a project, see how it, and then hopefully replicate it, correct? And allow it to grow in all across the country. The mission, and you said it in there, and I got it right in front of me here, you're going to publish stories focused on health disparities that impact Black and LGBTQ communities. Now, treat me like I'm a 3-year-old here, but why is there between the LGBTQ community the same disparities that would be between the Black communities? I mean, and who wants to field that one? Ken, maybe you can help me. And why is this such a big issue with your what we would call demographic or your readership?
Yeah, absolutely. And we always try to highlight as much as we can just the intersectional nature of this work and not put LGBTQ and Black communities in separate buckets and separate silos, because there is so much overlap between these communities and certainly individuals who hold both identities. Within the LGBTQ community, it really runs the gamut. I think one of the chief issues is a healthcare industry that just is not trained to work with LGBTQ populations. And so we hear constantly across the country, and certainly here in Ohio, that there's a dearth of healthcare providers who have sensitivity training, who are encountering the very specific needs of the LGBTQ community. And it results in many LGBTQ individuals who are seeking out healthcare options, both for physical health and certainly for mental health as well, staying home and not seeking the care that they might need. Certainly in COVID times, there are any number of comorbidities that LGBTQ people encounter, but a lot of trepidation and hesitation about interacting with the healthcare industry, which is both rooted in that lack of training and also a perception that persists throughout. So some real issues of LGBTQ people not seeking out the care that they really might need.
Shana, you're Cleveland. Kevin, you're Columbus, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So are those similar markets with exact same needs? I mean, is there a difference between the two in what you're trying to, how should I say, get the information out that people are so desperately needing right now to do this storytelling? Tell us a little bit more about your city, Kevin, and what you have there locally.
Yeah, so I would say in regards to just, I really want to piggyback a little bit in regards to what we focused on from a health disparity perspective.
Right.
Clearly in the Black community, there's a huge gap there. A lot of it goes back to trust, lack of knowledge, mistreatment in the past. And so one is we want to be able to educate and inform through journalism and through our platform to our audience to really help connect the dot. I think COVID really highlighted that for us, right? As we've said in our community, it is just truly like two pandemics going on. So we have the coronavirus pandemic, but then, as you know, they've identified, racism as a public health crisis. So we have two pandemics in our community. So when it comes to supporting and educating and informing and providing the right resources to help close those gaps and ensure that we don't have a disproportionate impact to our lives, it is very important that we help to close that gap. And our medium helps to do that. Shana can talk about Cleveland, and obviously there's going to be a lot of similarities in regards to those same factors due to the foundation and the systemic issues that we've had. But that's the reason why it's important here in Columbus.
Shana, he teed you up pretty well there.
He did, didn't he? Yeah. And just kind of to be the stake between the two of what Ken and Kevin have said, for us here in Cleveland, we are going through all the same things, but for Cleveland, we have some additional issues. So here in Cuyahoga County, we have a maternal health crisis. So women are like the birth rate, a positive birth outcome for a Black woman is on par with some of our third world countries. So the baby is most likely not going to make it to the first birthday, or the mother's not going to survive. And if you think about Cleveland has a lot of we're like a healthcare city. So we've got some amazing health institutions here, Cleveland Clinic, University Hospital, but yet we're still having this crisis. And then to confound that, when we want to talk about policy change, we can do some changes here locally, but most of it's coming out of Columbus, Franklin County, where the State House is. And so that's one of the things that I'm really excited to have, Kevin, to have that eyesight of what's happening at the State House, what's the bills that they're passing that are affecting my readers here in Cleveland that we can't access, or we're not covering or able to reach. And even to Ken's point, we've just recently run a story from the Buckeye Flame about Black women and AIDS rates going up, and how there's a drug called PrEP that's often, even in the commercials, is often marketed for LGBT folks but it works well for Black women, and it's not being prescribed because of the way people are viewing it. And so that's a story we just thought we needed to run, because we've got, for me, I always take it personally, like my readers are being impacted and we're not getting the help we need. So to have Kevin in Columbus and be able to access and have that reach of a voice coming from the state capitol, and then to have Ken covering some other issues of just things that are impacting our community, be it straight women or LGBT women, is just, it's so many stories that need to be told.
Kevin, I just saw you click off your mic. You want to add something to this?
Yeah, I was going to say that, that's a great example of how, Amplify Ohio and this collaboration, this coalition works together. Those stories, they're relevant to each of our markets. So that's the type of article that could be published, by Shana, but then also through Columbus Black. And then we can leverage resources. And from the start, we recognize how we could actually help, because there is some overlap in what we're all dealing with in our communities.
Ken, the Flame itself, it seems to me that your demography, your ages and income levels should be all over the place, but you're having the same issues of a poor. I'm not trying to paint this with one big broad brush, but the tie-in is now very revealing to me. Does this? And I've never heard this before, that the LGBTQ plus community is a minority, and it's getting treated. It's not being focused on enough, in your opinion, then, by the national healthcare system. Am I saying that right, Ken? I don't.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons the Buckeye Flame was created, was to challenge some of the narratives out there, particularly in the journalism and media space. A lot of the coverage that's out there, even in Ohio, when covering the LGBTQ community, is often just about white gay men in Columbus. And fun fact, there's actually other LGBTQ people in Ohio other than white gay men in Columbus. And so we work really hard to lift up the narratives from across the state. And that includes rural areas of Ohio. In these very, Columbus and Cleveland can be very blue parts of the state, but that's only a fraction of what's going on in Ohio. We have so many LGBTQ people who are living in spaces where these conversations are just not taking place. And again, that intersectional piece, conversations are not taking place about LGBTQ identity. They're not taking place about racial justice, about sexism. And so for vulnerable members of the LGBTQ community who are living across the state and just don't have access to these resources, that's part of our responsibility, is to lift up those stories.
Wow.
I should also highlight, again, going back to the intersectional piece, it is different. It's much different being a white gay male in Columbus than talking about being a Black trans woman in Cleveland, where we continuously have documented murders of Black trans women in Cleveland. And we have to talk about those issues that are just not being covered in a way that isn't just about statistics, but is lifting up the lives of these women and where the system has really failed them.
Nancy, as you might remember, you and I have had many, many dinners on the road together over the years. I'm kind of a closet historian. I live in the past. I constantly read. And one of the things that I've always said, and it's amazing, I'm living now through this 2020, whatever we just went through, is crisis accelerates change. And I think that's one thing that you can look at all of history. Without a crisis, change rarely happens. We're in the midst of a major crisis, obviously, and hopefully on the back end of it. And I'm discussing COVID-19. But Nancy, you and I both know that E&P's roots, my magazine, is been in the newspaper side of the media industry. We obviously, our audience now is much broader. We have radio and broadcast. We have pure plays, which are those that don't have a press. But you and I both know that this industry has been a fat old white men industry, if I may be so blunt. Because, I started in this industry in 1999 and traveled all over to every shape, size, flavor of newspaper. Do you feel that there's finally a change coming in this industry? Is there? Because there's so many people discussing, even E&P got eviscerated once because all the pictures of my voices one day were all white men, just because my CMS put them in there. And that's, full disclosure, my editor-in-chief is an Asian American woman, and my managing editor is a Hispanic American woman. But still, do you see this crisis making a change finally? And I want you to be honest about it. Are we getting there as an industry?
No,
No?
no, no.
She said it. Okay, don't hold back, Nancy. How do you really feel?
Baby steps. But you saw the audit from the Philadelphia Inquirer this week,
Yes,
right?
right.
And kudos to the Inquirer under Lenfest,
Yep,
ownership
Lenfest.
that they did that, right? But what it exposed is what we all know. And you want to get depressed, go to the C-level photos of any major media company, the board of directors for any major media company, and you will see a sea of white men. The gender balance is terrible. And then people of color, it's almost non-existent. And that has to change, Mike. That has to change. And the composition of the newsrooms has to change. And so there is so much work to be done. But I will say, one of our 4 core pillars at LMA is sustainability for publishers of color. Publishers of color have been hard hit before COVID and especially during COVID. And now is the time for the funding community to step up and invest. And I always tell this story on the stage. We launched a digital transformation lab with 5 Black publishers in 2019. And we had 6 projects that year, and it was the only project that nobody would fund. No one. We went to 10 different funders, and the answer was no, no, no. The only project was the one to help 5 Black publishers with digital transformation. I went to the LMA board, and it was the first time we ever funded anything, because we're not a funding organization. We don't have deep pockets, but we funded it. And we need more of that. And I do see the funding community stepping up. Borealis is doing great work. Knight is starting to invest more. Solutions Journalism Network is investing more. So on the funding side, I'm seeing some positive signs. But on the mainstream media side, no. But long way to go.
You might remember that a couple months ago, I did a podcast with Vision 25, the founders of that initiative, which claim not only is there isn't diversity, there's actually prejudice in the news. People are unaware that a Black reporter in a newspaper may feel as if they have to write towards, that was a Freudian slip, but may not be able to write what their heart is at because they're living in that environment and they're feeling. But what I'm getting off of, I'm enjoying here, is with Shana, Ken, and Kevin, the reason that their websites and their voices are growing might be because the traditional media isn't in the space you guys are in. I mean, I see you nodding your head, Shana. Take it from there. Do you feel that way, that there was a void you had to fill in? Because, and I'm not just discussing newspapers here. I'm discussing Nancy will admit this. I mean, you might see some anchors of color, but who's really running the shop? Am I right, Nancy? I mean, who owns that network? Who's running the show? So, Shana, do you feel that there's a void that has to be picked up?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how we started, was that as I started back in 2016, you would see people come to Cleveland and look at the Rock Hall, and we've had the RNC and, the Cavs championship, and all of these stories they don't look like me. And then it started becoming this statement of, can we go to these places? So if there is a polka thing to celebrate Fat Tuesday here in Cleveland, the question started to become, is it safe for us to go? And we still have neighborhoods where we question that. Is it safe? And so one of the things I've been able to do is kind of bridge that gap and be the person to say, hey, it's okay. Like, they're not treating us crazy. Come on down. And, how can we showcase that? Currently, we're on this campaign of doing murals, and we've been showing murals of people of color that are around the city. And no one was showing that. We see the same murals of Cleveland, and it's usually, a white face saying, isn't this amazing? We love Cleveland. And it just really started to be, where's Cleveland for me? And so that space is there. And so we've been writing about it and like, let's go do these things. And then what we found out was that people were scared to go because they just weren't sure how they were going to be treated. So we started hearing from our readers, ooh, I want to try that, but I'm not sure. And so we had to start creating space and events and opportunities for people to come with us so that they could get into the city. I heard that this doesn't have things that represent Black people, or I heard that. And so we're really in this space where local news, covers us here and there, or, oh, it's Black History Month, let's look at some Black creatives. And but our stories aren't being there, and our stories are, even I still get pushback of it's not always a Black thing, Shana, or you should change the name of your blog, Shana, because it's, what about always not, it always doesn't have to be a Black thing, and legit it's my last name. So it's just really a space that's still there. And then we lost the plain dealer this year, and so it was really a bigger vacuum of who's telling the story of African Americans here in Northeast Ohio.
Kevin, I saw you nodding your head. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Mike, a little while ago, you mentioned voice, and it's just critically important that we have a voice. And that's something that we don't find in traditional media and traditional resources. So that's where our platforms really come into play. People want to be able to relate and resonate, want information that resonates with them. Short story is it reminds me of when I was in corporate America. I spent 25 years as a corporate executive. And if you're in different positions throughout your organization, you don't see anybody that looks like you, that you can relate to. You never think that it's even possible or is not as relevant to you. Having a media platform that really caters to our audience is critically important, just to the livelihood, the lifestyles, the happiness of these individuals. We're in the 14th largest city in the country, and you will have a lot of Black people who say there's nothing to do here in Columbus, or we don't know what's going on, or we're not connected, or we're moving and relocating because they don't have that platform. And once they get connected with Columbus Black, which is what we hear all the time, is like, oh my God, like this changed my entire life. Is that critically important just to have that platform?
Ken, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's finding that space within the industry for LGBTQ voices and coverage. As I said earlier, it's a real struggle here in Ohio. We're right out the gate with a new legislative session, and there are, even during a pandemic, there are Republican state senators and state representatives who have prioritized discriminating against the LGBTQ community. We have so many other things to be working on here, but we're a state that doesn't have equal protections for housing, employment, or public accommodations. So I don't anticipate being fired from my professor job, but I could be fired from my professor job. I can be kicked out of a restaurant. I can be kicked out of housing, all for being gay. And so it's really important. And I should say, and then they're going above and beyond and proposing more legislation to be even more restrictive. And so it's really important to I was telling Nancy, this is a word we were already using, so I want to adapt it, but it's important to amplify those stories, because first of all, not everybody knows, and there are people moving to the state. When I drove here in 2013 from Vermont to Ohio, it wasn't in my head that I was leaving behind all of these protections that I had as a gay man. And I'm a white gay man, so I have protections that so many of my siblings don't. So we have to cover these issues because others just aren't doing it.
It someday will happen, maybe after I'm dead. I'm the oldest one on this thing, so I'm 63. But I mean, someday, possibly every other elected legislature will be a woman, right? I mean, and then actually, what, 60% should, or in the next few years, 60% should be of color, and 1 out of 5 should be part of the LGBTQ community. I mean, we're just not even represented in media, but we're not even represented. So this is my last question, and anyone can take this. We've been through 2 crises, and I'm going to get a little political right now, because not only were we through the COVID crisis, but we had 4 years of the most dominant voices coming from the right. Ken, you just said it, so I'm going to let you pick that up again. And you're just a stone's throw from Indiana. That's enough said there. So how does that impact you? I mean, because you just said you're in Ohio, so I'll leave it. I'm just going to leave that. But you've got a few battles to fight. Am I correct, sir?
More than a few. Yeah, we don't need to look to Indiana. We have enough to focus on here. And former President Trump was one of the most anti-LGBTQ, if not the most anti-LGBTQ presidents we have ever had, despite some really bizarre narratives that have come from that administration saying the opposite. Without question, proactively rolled back LGBTQ protections. And here in the state of Ohio, we have 2 state representatives who want to put it on the table to recognize Flag Day, which is also former President Trump's birthday, as Donald Trump Day here in Ohio. And for the LGBTQ community and all communities who have struggled here in Ohio, that is both a monumental insult, but also indicative of where the priorities are right now in the Columbus State House.
My word. Shana, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, as Ken said, we don't need to look to Indiana. Ohio has some progressive cities, and then, like of the 88 counties, it's really rural. So even the drive from Cleveland to Columbus, a drive that I would take, and I still often take, once I leave Cleveland's bubble, it starts to become, in the past 4 years, like, do I want to stop here? Is it okay? Again, is it safe for me to get out as a Black woman to get gas at this gas station? And as you take the diagonal literally from Cleveland to Columbus and head down to Cincinnati, which is Kentucky's border, it's even more so. And so, there were 4 years of, we saw, police killings and marches and all kind of things where even in our own little bubble here of Cleveland, like, we were concerned because, it just isn't, the question is always for me as a Black woman, and as most women go through, is it safe? Can I take my kids with me? Should I be out here? Or am I going to be subjected to any kind of thing? And it just really started to see the intersection of what some of Ken's readers of, a trans Black woman, is she being killed because she's a trans Black woman or because she's a Black woman? Either way, like, I'm a Black woman, I'm worried. And so, we still have an uphill fight. We have, so much to kind of unpack and work towards. And even when we're doing the right things, it seems like, the right things, our leaders aren't supporting us or helping us, or, mistreatment in hospitals, those kind of things. And so, 4 years is not necessarily over for us.
Kevin, bring it home. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, so, I think about what we're talking about right now, and I think about 2020, which was a year of vision for us, right? So with so much political discord, when you think about the civil unrest and the fact that politically that was heightened for the first time to this degree in a long time, there's a lot of impact that has had. It's been extremely traumatic for us as far as people of color, especially in regards to what is now identified, through 2020 and that vision and all that happened, this public health crisis, which is racism. So when you take a look at what has happened over the last 4 years and how it has evolved and where we are right now, it shows us how much work still has to be done. The positive, if I had to pull a positive, because I'm 3/4 of the glass full all the time, is the fact that as a country, we clearly know exactly where we are. There's nobody that can say that they hadn't seen it right before their eyes. We can't say anymore that it sounds fake or I don't believe that. Now you see it. And this is where our platforms at Amplify Ohio, where we get to amplify our voice and provide that content for our audiences, is so critically important, because otherwise people will still say, I had no idea. That's our job, to educate and to inform and then to help change.
Well, it's more than just the health disparities. You're discussing
Absolutely.
all disparities. Nancy, kudos to LMA, Local Media Association, for another one of your 6,000 projects you currently manage right now. But you guys are launching something every hour almost. I know I'm being, but every day there's something new and exciting. If people want to learn more, the many publishers that are listening, news publishers to this or viewing it, how can they get more information from LMA? Maybe be part of the next incubation. How do they get a hold of you? What do they do?
Sure. So you can always email me, nancy.lane@localmedia.org. But we will be issuing regular reports from this group, probably about monthly, to share the progress being made. And I would just say, whatever market you're in or state you're in, there are people you can collaborate with. And it's going it alone is no longer a strategy.
I agree.
Finding others in your market or your state or, around a topic. Find those partners that want to work with you, and good things will happen. And these are 3 really important voices. I think you see that today, Mike. We have to find sustainable business models for these 3 voices and the many other voices out there that represent Black and LGBTQ communities, Latinx communities. The list goes on, right? There's a lot of work to do, but it starts with collaboration. So thank you again for having us today.
Yeah, when I looked at getting E&P, Nance, and I was doing my due diligence, I wrote down 3 bullets for what a news publisher is. And they are someone who has to craft some content, find an audience for it, but you just named the third, and then monetize it. no matter how you do it, whether it's contribution, whether it's reader revenue, whether it's advertising support, whether it's holding out a tin cup in front, Shana, and begging, you got to find the money behind it or you can't have content. So those are the three pillars. Guys, listen, do me a favor. The industry needs all of you. We need all of this. So stay healthy, wear a mask. I'm sure you are. And let's get through this together. Nancy, again, thanks to LMA for the amazing things you're doing for the industry. Of course, we'll always be chatting with you. And thanks again for your valuable time off. We at E&P really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Time.